Hi everyone, this is a video edition of the Scattered podcast. I'm Yvonne Chorlin. I'm a physical or biological anthropologist and archaeologist, and this is a short video of my contribution to the Alberta portion of a cross-Canada scavenging project led by Dr. Sherry Forbes. To learn more about Sherry and the origin of this project, listen to episode 16 of the audio portion of this podcast. In a nutshell, law enforcement need to recover as much potential forensic evidence as possible to help solve cases. They approach Sherry with two questions. Where do we search for this evidence and how far do we search for it? To help answer these questions, Sherry wants to identify the scavengers and their scavenger behavior to figure out who may have influenced the movement of this evidence, and then also to map the dispersal of the evidence so we know where it went. By identifying the scavengers and their scavenger behavior and mapping the dispersal of the evidence, we hope to see patterns and be able to answer the two questions of where and how far to search for the remains so that we can answer this for law enforcement. So having these ideas and these questions is all fine and dandy, but how do you do this? How do you identify the scavengers and map the dispersal of the remains? Well, that's where this video comes in. I'm going to show you. This is our Edmonton dump site, near the city of Edmonton's landfill, near the northeast border of the city of Edmonton city limits. All of our pigs weigh between 150 to 250 pounds, and all of them are dressed in human clothing to simulate a real situation. A cable is tied around each carcass, and the other end is tied around a tree to help keep the carcass between the cameras. The cable does not impede scavenger activity. While the pig was being set up and Sherry was setting up the cameras, I took notes and photographs of the pig and the surrounding area, and I made a sketch map of any topographical features including fence lines, buildings, and roads. We also had a drone available from the Edmonton City Police, which we used to take aerial photos. Then we set the cameras and we left and waited for the scavengers to show up. It took about a week before we started to see the first animals: rabbit, coyote, fox, birds. However, coyotes and multiple coyotes at night seem to be our main scavenger. Here you can see how the coyotes have moved the carcass out of camera frame, then partially moved it back into camera frame, and then they'll move it back out of camera frame. On October 4th, 2021, about 2 months after we initially placed the pig, we returned and did a preliminary search. What we did at the Edmonton dump site, both the forested and the open locations, was a little bit different than what we did at other sites. We did our preliminary search a month early so that we could accommodate schedules and bring out a search and rescue volunteer team to help us search. Different units of the Edmonton City Police also came out so that they could practice their search management techniques. The volunteer search team performed a hands and knees search of both the forested and open locations. They flagged anything they found. Then, members of Edmonton Police Ident Unit marked and photographed anything the flags indicated. There was a lot of new leaf litter at this site, and a lot of the skeletal remains still had some flesh attached. At the original deposition point, we could see body staining and dead vegetation. Some of the remains from the forested site were dispersed across a gravel road that traveled through the general area and toward another access road. When I made my sketch map, I could see that there was a dispersal towards the south, southeast, and east, where there were also trails towards the southeast. Our egress point was from the northeast, so these trails must have been made during the dispersal. On these aerial photos of our forested site, you can see the pattern of dispersal towards the south, and towards the east they dispersed up to 50 meters. Then we left the site to overwinter and we returned the next year. Okay, I am at one of the sites that we did last year. east of Edmonton, so this is at the dump. So this is the dump forested or closed site. It's not as closed or as foresty as some of our other sites, but we did what we could with what we had. So this pig was put out on August 11th, 2021. It is now August 24th, 2022. So this pig was out for more than a year. And the original deposition point was about there. I believe we had a camera either there or there, and the pig was cabled over here. So we had a bit of a diverse spread in here, and then the trail went out there, and the remains were spread out into the open area about 50 meters in a southeast direction out over in there. So we had a game trail in here with the remains spread, and then the original deposition point was in here with a diverse spread. So that was west, that way is north, east, and south. The condition of the flags are not great. We've got a lot of bleaching of the flags. A lot of the numbers have faded. Flags have moved. So we started flagging about 1 at the beginning of the game trail, and then worked our way in because the search crew came in this way from the south to the north. So flags started from 1, 2, 3 up in there, and then we got into the late teens and 20s over here. Number of flags 7 should have been about in there. When I found it, it was over there. So the flags have traveled. A lot of the remains that were associated with any flags that we found are gone. And today it's just me searching. So we're low on manpower, so doing a hands and knees search is not a viable option. So the method of searching that I did today was I looked for the flags, I put them upright, and then I searched around the flag and tried to see what I could see, because hopefully the flag has not traveled too far from whatever remains it was marking. So there we go, that's a better view. You can see the flags in the spread. So that's east, that's south. We've got a gravel road there. There have been horses in here recently too, so there's a lot of horse dung. There's also a lot of trampling. It could be one of the main reasons why the flags were trampled and moved. And some of the remains that I found were actually embedded into the ground, so that could be part of the horses trampling could have pushed the remains into the ground. And I'll just take a walk along the game trail that we found. So this is our original deposition area. You can see there's hardly any body staining, at least from what you can see here. It's not great blading conditions. We did have some remains in here. Some ribs mainly were left in here. And then the game trail, I believe, went this way. Can't really see it anymore because it's very trampled in here. And then the remains carried on in a trail out to about there. It's about 55 meters out to where we found the last remains. So they carried on in through here.
When I did an inventory on the remains we recovered about 1 year after we deposited the pig, I found that we had recovered less than 10% of the skeleton. Domestic horses trampling the site may have influenced this number. When I looked at the types of bones that made up the remains we recovered, I saw it was mostly vertebrae, ribs, and skull fragments. I also wanted to know if the longer we left out the carcass and the remains, the fewer remains we would recover. And it looks like that's exactly what happened. The longer the carcass was out, the less we recovered. So what have we learned so far? At this site, our main scavengers were coyotes, usually multiple, magpies, rabbit, possibly a skunk. Recoverability of the remains at this site may have also been impacted by domestic horses trampling. Scavenging activity at this site started almost immediately and continued through September. Remains were dispersed along a trail created during dispersal and then through an open field. We recovered less than 10% of the skeleton, and of what we recovered, it was mostly ribs, vertebrae, and skull fragments. So what have we learned overall across all of our sites? We learned that our main scavengers are coyotes, bears, and birds, as we saw here. Game trails can be created or used by scavengers to access the carcass and disperse the remains. Between the preliminary search and the final search, there was a difference. Initially, we discovered 20 to 50% of the remains within about 3 months of the carcass placement, and then that went down at about a year when we discovered only 2 to 53%. The majority of the remains were discovered within a 100-meter radius of the original deposition point, and the majority of the bones that we recovered were either vertebrae or ribs. This video would not have been possible without the study led by Dr. Sherry Forbes. The Calgary and Edmonton Police Services were instrumental in helping us find land to use and to coordinate the searches and carcasses, and of course, to let us know if this information is useful to them. Many big, huge, massive thanks to the landowners and pig growers. We couldn't have done this research without you. To find out more about this study and the topic of scattered and scavenged remains, tune into my podcast, Scattered, one person's search for the story behind scattered remains, available on your favorite podcast platform. Also, check out other videos in this series about this study, available on my website, yvonnechorlin.com, and read about it on my blog and Facebook, The Reluctant Archaeologist.